Hi, everyone. I'm Stephen W. Long. This is The Writing Life, and I'm so pleased to be able to talk with my friend Val Blaha today. And kind of the impetus for the show is that Val is going to be a presenter at this year's Terroir Creative Writing Festival and expand the definition of writing, I guess, to songwriting. And let me tell you a little bit about Val. She's a musician, a teacher, a songwriter, a poet, and an artist, and a playwright. And is that newish?
New, yes.
Yeah. She's the current president of AAYC, and which helps support this program. Val is the real deal. She has released 5 studio albums, including 2019's World on Fire, and this is the playwright part, just completed the first draft of a musical, Ruby Sneakers.
That's right.
So, and I wanted to mention as well that you've been involved in human-created ecological solutions rather than, I was going to say problems, but that's what you're addressing. And so that's kind of I think an admirable offshoot. But Val, welcome.
Thank you.
And I've said before that I think about this topic as so encompassing. It's such a big thing. And I had talked about Kurt Vonnegut as skeptical of writing seminars.
Right.
And he said that that's about as effective as heart surgery seminars. But then, you know, I thought of something else too, and that is Ian Tyson. Are you familiar with? And so, one half of Ian and Sylvia.
Yeah.
And his shining light was Gordon Lightfoot, and wanted to be like that. And so Ian said, well, I'm going to write a song, and he wrote Four Strong Winds. I believe that was his first song, kind of instantly became a big hit, and he said, well, this is easy. I can do that. And after he said that, didn't have another hit for 4 years. So that's the setup to say, how do you do this? How are you going to teach songwriting?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question, Stephen. Thanks for having me on the program today. You know, it's interesting. I have been sort of a lifelong student. I love to learn from other people because I know that there are always so many people who know more about everything than I do. So over the past, 5 to 10 years during the pandemic and even before, I've taken a lot of classes and online, and I read, and the classes that I've had and the instruction that I've taken in has helped me hone my songwriting. When I started off, it was pretty free-form. I would just get an idea and I would sit and I would write, and inspiration would kind of strike, hopefully most of the time, but it wasn't very, I don't want to say disciplined, but there was not like a process that I adhered to.
Okay. A roadmap.
Exactly, a roadmap. Yeah. And, a little bit, because we've worked together with the guitar,
sure.
That, I really believe in breaking things down into small pieces. That's how you go from having a blank page to having a full-length musical.
Right.
Or just a song or a poem or a novel.
Yeah.
So my plan for the workshop, which I'm really looking forward to, is really to kind of just break it down into the steps that I have been using to write songs for the past few years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this is going to be a silly question. It's kind of a chicken or egg thing. Do you, I assume that you start with the idea for the song rather than the melody. Is that correct or no?
Most often I do. There are some times when I will start and I'll have just kind of a melody or a riff or something. Okay. But I tend to start with the words.
Yeah.
That's my process. Other people do it differently.
Okay. Interestingly, that's sort of a segue. I know that there are songwriting teams, and gosh, I'm thinking of, the Gershwins as an example. Yeah. Hal David and Burt Bacharach, Elton John and Bernie Taupin, and on and on. I'm assuming that they have a predisposition or a feeling for, I just feel the melody, whereas somebody else maybe approaches it more like a poem set to music. Leonard Cohen, as an example.
Right. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And being someone who does, I do all of it. I have done a little bit of co-writing. It's something that I'd love to get better at because I think writing with someone else is a skill. But when it's just me doing it, I kind of like having the control over all the aspects. And one of the most important things in songwriting is to make sure you have basically 3 elements in a song. You have lyrics, assuming we're talking about lyrical songs.
Yeah.
You have melody, and then you have harmony, or the chords that are underlying, kind of the structure. Underlying. And they all have to work together in order for the song to really hit home and have an emotional resonance, which is, the best songs you feel and you go back to because they pull at your heartstrings. And,
Sure.
So I like kind of, I guess, doing all the bits and putting it all together.
Yeah.
And I've been a musician for so long. For me, the writing part is the newer part because I've been playing music and I've been writing melodies since I was tiny. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hadn't factored in harmony, and I would, when you were saying that, I thought, my goodness, this is a lifetime's work to try to, but maybe some people are just oriented like that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it just has to do, I've studied music. I started playing piano when I was 6. I started singing when I was in my crib. Like my grandmother from Colombia remembers, when I was younger, she talked to my parents about, oh, she's always singing. And then I studied music through high school. I studied it in college. In my 20s, when I picked up guitar, we didn't have this thing called the internet that we have now. And so I couldn't just look up a song. If I wanted to learn the Indigo Girls Closer to Fine, I couldn't just go online and look up the chords. I had to sit and figure it out. And so in kind of doing that and then diving really deep into, okay, wait, what's working? How is this put together? That and a lot of my just kind of musical educational background has helped me learn what the function, chords in a song is kind of in the weeds, a little nerdy, but like chords have functions in the song. There's a chord that's home, it's the place you go back to. There are chords that, bring tension. There are chords that resolve tension. There are chords that take you into another place if you're ever listening to a song and it feels like it's just shifted. Like, there's all kinds of ways you can use the chords. And I've had a lifetime kind of knowledge of that I get to bring in when I write. So
this may, I don't know if this is going to show up in your presentation.
Yeah.
You and I have talked about this a little bit, but there's, as you said, there's a feeling that, music is emotional. And I have heard, and you and I have talked about chord progression. And so 1, 4, 5. And I wonder, why do we feel that? Is that inherent in humanity? And I'm going to answer my own question. Probably not, because Asian music, as an example, to me is discordant. But what do you think? Is this culturally embedded in us?
I think you're kind of onto something there. I think, our music comes, all music is like part of, those trees of rock. Have you ever seen that tree of rock where you can see all the bands that come from, and the music that we play or write or listen to today comes from music from, centuries ago and through the last century of, rock and folk music and blues and bluegrass. And, there's kind of branches, right, that everything comes from. And you're right, other cultures have different scales. They have notes that we don't have in ours. And so if we try to add those into our ear, it sounds really discordant is a good word. Yeah. But I think there's just certain patterns that we've grown to expect. Anyone who's grown up and listened to music since the 50s, we blues and Elvis and, country and all these things, there's just patterns.
Yeah.
What's it, 3 chords in a song? You could have, so many songs are just those 3 chords.
Right.
But it's fun to open it up wider and that's one of the things I like about writing for musical theater is it's not really, I don't tend to stay in the 1-4-5 as much. Because you want the musical theater songs, they have a little bit of a different function than just a rock song. They're moving the character, say, from one place to another place, emotionally, physically, you know. And so it's fun to dive into, okay, well, you know, I need to go other places in order to get this feeling of they're going through something and changing.
Yeah. I've heard about story songs. I think Western or country music is probably known for that, as are other things. But in a play, that's it, right? I mean, you're telling a story, you're just telling it in song.
Well, not necessarily, because you can have dialogue. I mean, there's some musicals that are sung through, and you know, all the way through. What I'm thinking, Les Mis, right? I don't know that there's much dialogue. Certain things, Hamilton was mostly, you know, sung through. There's not a lot of just talking in that. There's like 25, 30 songs in it. But the songs are kind of bridges, in a way, is how I think of it in a musical when I was writing my musical. That, okay, these characters enter and they're first singing this song that's kind of building the world. Like the first song in a musical is usually what they call the world building song. To sort of drop the audience into this space and learn a little bit, like, oh, who's this person, what's this place, what's going on.
Okay. And in that case, it would be both lyrics and music.
Definitely, yeah. It doesn't have to be, but when I write, it tends to be.
Well, and I was thinking of a play, and just because of what you said, it made me think of supporting music, background music, maybe in a movie. And I think sometimes if we're not really paying attention, it's there, but we're focused on the screen. But boy, does that enhance or guide our emotion. Yes,
yeah. One of my favorite classes, I went to UC Santa Barbara for my undergrad, and one of my favorite classes I ever took was a class in the film department on music for movies.
Sure.
My good friend was a film major, so I took the class with her just for fun, and I was studying music, so it seemed appropriate. And it was so fascinating it just kind of opened my eyes to things I hadn't really thought about before.
Yeah.
As far as the function of music, like, you know, the score is kind of what you're talking about, rather than like, say, songs that are added. Yeah, and it's so fun, and that's an area that I'd love to get into more. I've done a couple of songs, lyrical songs, for a couple of short films, but I'd love to get into doing some scoring.
It really, it adds so much, and again, it seems to me that often people don't know it's there, or they're not paying attention to it. But boy, if you took it away, what a difference it would make.
Yeah, think of like Jaws. You know, everyone over a certain age, you know, you just do that.
Yeah. John Williams? Is that?
I believe he did.
I think that was John
that's
Williams.
right. Yeah.
The score for Dances with Wolves, I thought was so dramatic.
Did he do that one too?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Yeah. I saw him conduct the Santa Barbara Symphony Orchestra.
Oh boy.
A whole bunch of his movie themes back in the 90s, I guess.
Oh,
that was really fun.
Is he still with us?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, or another one of my favorites is Danny Elfman.
Oh, sure.
Who did like Nightmare Before Christmas and Big Fish and a whole ton of others.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love what he does. That kind of broad painting of, you know, these sounds and how those composers use non-lyrical music is fascinating.
I want to get to a little demo.
Oh.
But before we do that, we're talking about emotion. And I don't know that you can explain this or comment on it, but a major note as opposed to a minor note. I mean, or a seventh. And I'm trying to remember the description of these, but it's, well, like the color. You know, these have a color and an emotion. And I don't know, again, if that's just a human thing, or if we culturally, if we pick that up along the way. Yeah,
you know, these are all great questions. And I studied anthropology, and that's what my master's is in, actually. So now I kind of wish I'd gone and done more, like with ethnomusicology or just with studying music and its impact, these questions. Because chords, you're right, we have major and minor chords and sevenths, and I think it's just that we've grown up I'd be curious to know. I'm sure some people have researched this. Is
Yeah.
it, nature or nurture? But, if you live in our culture and you're surrounded by music, like so many of us are, it's just, I can ask a 6-year-old once I've kind of explained major and minor, and they can really hear it. They're like,
Sure.
oh, minor is sad, and I'll make up a song about, dropping my ice cream cone and put it in minor or put it in major, and they're like, yeah, that doesn't work. And,
Yeah.
So.
It's something visceral.
Yeah.
I mean, we really feel it. And I think like flowers in nature, something, we're blessed to have music.
Yeah.
But let's have you do a kind of a demonstration of one of your songs, and we'll come back and talk about where that came from.
Cool. Okay. Put the coffee on. She drove to work like any other Thursday. Kissed her mom's cheek before she left. At 8 a.m. she saw the news on the TV. As the panic settled down into her chest, we don't have the luxury of denial. The fire's on the mountain and it's roaring down at us. We don't have the time to argue and debate about blame or luck or fate. If we want to live in paradise. Jenny got in her car, tried to head back home, but the road was a mess with no way through. She spent the day calling on the phone, refusing to accept the unwanted truth that we don't have the luxury of denial. The fire's on the mountain and it's roaring down at us. We don't have the time to argue and debate about blame or luck or fate. If we want to live in paradise, we can't know if there's a heaven. All we have is what we touch and feel. But we can say no to the devil. The greed turning our world into a living hell, and we don't have the luxury of denial. The fire's on the mountain and it's roaring down at us. We don't have the time to argue and debate about blame or luck or fate. If we want to live in paradise. Jenny woke up in her forest home that morning.
And we're back.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you that particular song. I think I know the impetus for that. But can you talk about a little bit about Paradise was really Paradise, I think, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it was definitely based on the Paradise Fire that happened in California, Northern California in 2018, which I grew up in Southern California. I know you did. You lived in Southern California. Grew up there too. And so, fire was always part of my childhood where I lived in the Thousand Oaks area. The hills
Okay.
around us would burn.
Sure.
Many years, I used to pack up all my stuffed animals into plastic bags. And part of why I moved to Oregon in my 20s was because it was so green and wet. And so in 2018, the day of the Paradise Fire, my parents lived in LA still, and the Woolsey Fire happened. And it started about 7 miles from my parents' home, and my mother was in bad health. Long story short, we got my parents evacuated early before everyone else evacuated at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Meantime, that day, the Paradise Fire had happened, which, we found out later was much more devastating in terms of loss of life, at least. And my parents were fine. It wasn't a great experience, but they were okay. They didn't lose their home.
Yeah.
But so fire has been kind of a theme even before I wrote that song. My album was called World on Fire.
Right.
I had a song called that. And so for this song, I was just really thinking about, the climate change, I guess, and
Right.
the conditions that have brought us to this place where the fires are burning in a way that is so different. My dad was incredulous. He didn't want to evacuate. He didn't think it was a problem. It had never been a problem before.
Yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to write a song about, we are living in this beautiful place, but, how can we keep our eyes open and realize like something has to change?
Sure.
So I started to write that. And for that particular song, I kind of wanted to set it in the situation of this person who, she went to work, everything was fine. And then, her mother was still at home during the fire.
Right.
So.
This is probably an odd juxtaposition, but in some way it reminds me of Bonnie Raitt's A Nick of Time.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess the connection is that song and your song were motivated by real events.
Yeah.
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 And so a cliched question is, where do you get your ideas? Well, they're all around.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good question. I was actually thinking a lot as I've been preparing for the workshop for
Yeah.
Terroir. And yeah, lots of times the ideas come from, events. Sometimes they just come from emotion. Since 2016, a lot of them were my songs have been fairly political just
Yeah.
because there's so much going on in the world.
Yes.
But also, it's there's a songwriter who I've been following, and she had some really good ideas about like listen to other songs and take just a phrase or a word from that song, and then write about what that triggers in you. What do you
Okay.
think about?
Okay.
So I did that, and I actually just like wrote a new song, just edited it this morning called
Oh.
"Mirror, Mirror." That was from a line from. The line that was from actually Windmills of My Mind.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, ideas come from all different
A
kinds of
circle in a
places.
circle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Kind of that idea of time folding in on itself.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And of course, I can't think of one at the moment, but I have heard a line or part of a line and just been entranced by that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, I wish I'd have written that, or
Yeah.
but I guess you can use that as a jump-off point
Yeah.
for your own.
Yeah, and it's funny because I find lots of times when I start with an idea and kind of work through some steps to figure out where that idea is going, what's the emotion, the song will end up slightly different. It's like the lens kind of shifts.
Right.
It doesn't always end up exactly what I thought
Yeah.
I was going to write about.
Well, before we run out of time, I'm sort of back to the presentation. Are you going to have an opportunity to talk about like the timing, like 3/4 time or 4/4 time? How does that factor in?
Yeah, no, I mean, so that's kind of, I'm mostly, because it's a writing workshop and I'm kind of focused on the written word. I'm definitely focused more on kind of going through the lyrics, how to build the lyrics.
Okay.
But I do have something that's prepared to talk a little bit about some basic music, depending on the audience's interest, what the group kind of wants and how much time we have.
Okay.
So yeah, because, time signature, even where you put the words in.
Right,
you know,
phrasing? Is that what that's
kind
called?
of phrasing, or like, where, do you sing on the first beat? Do you sing, do you sing before the beat? Do you wait till after? And all these things kind of build the feeling that you're trying to create in the song.
There's a real parallel with writing.
Yeah,
I
I'll
mean,
bet.
like writing literature as opposed to songwriting.
Yeah.
Where do you start the story? Before the precipitating event, at or after?
Yeah.
After that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you dropping in?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always different.
Yeah.
You know, depending on the song.
I noticed when you were playing, it seemed to me that I'm trying to remember now. I think that the singing actually started first. Or am I misremembering?
I think you mean as far as like coming in on beat number one.
Yeah.
Sally, I think it didn't. I think it came in like probably right on beat one.
Oh, okay.
I think, but now you've got me. I'll have to go back and look.
Okay.
I've got several songs kind of swirling around. I've written a few songs in the last couple weeks, and so I have several different songs swirling around in my head.
I think about, and I don't know that this is true, but I had heard that I think for Staying Alive, the movie, the Bee Gees were approached, and sort of the mandate was, well, we want 3 hit songs, 3 supporting songs, and a filler. Or so, I mean, that because I don't have that talent, I'm thinking, is that even possible? I think I'll write a hit song, as opposed to something else.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. I haven't had a lot of chart hits. I have had my songs played on like folk radio or in this country and around the world.
Yeah.
So that's nice. And one of the songs that had that happen was one of those songs that just sort of felt right when I got done with it. Yeah. There are certain songs you write and you're like, I feel really good about this one, like it's going to connect.
So that brings me to something else that I thought of just before we started, and that is, I think, is your genre Americana?
That's a great question. I think these days it is. I used to kind of call myself country folk.
Yeah.
I'm kind of folky just because my lyrics often tend to have to do more with maybe events or things like that rather than just. They're not always love songs, although, folk has love songs. So yeah, but I would call myself Americana.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad, I love how broad Americana is.
Yeah.
It's a big umbrella.
I think it's sometimes, maybe this is a blurred line, but it may be hard to categorize accurately.
Yeah.
Any of these things. So.
Yeah, I mean, look at Beyonce, like her new album. There's been this, kind of kerfluffle over,
No, that's kind of a country. Is that?
Yeah, but I'm thinking of it as it's falling, Americana, right? Because it's not like what's on radio country today.
Yeah.
Which isn't something that I personally listen to, although I love a lot of country music, and I've been so influenced by it, but a lot of like the Johnny Cash, Emmylou Harris,
sure,
all that kind of country. And her album is just you could tell it's from a really deep well of American music from the past 50, 100 years. And
in other words, not her necessarily, but she went to that source.
Yeah, or just you can see, I think it seems like she purposefully is pulling out influences, right? And pulling out kind of these threads of, going back to Blackbird, which Paul McCartney wrote about, like the civil rights and a whole issue with the girls being bused, I believe. Right. It's fascinating, and it's gotten me thinking, and a lot of the musicians I follow have been writing about genre, and it's sort of restrictive. It can be restrictive if you look at a genre as being a very narrow box. And
that reminds me that some time ago there was a song about I've gone country, and it's because you can it's like even if you don't really feel it, you can fake it and join this group. And I think that's probably, if somebody does that, I suspect it's pretty transparent.
Yeah, and that's what I love so much about what she's done on this album, is that it's just it's we all have so many influences, sure, and we can all tap into and we all have not everybody. Some people are really like, I only like vanilla ice cream, right? Or some, what I mean? They like one thing and that's all they do. But like, I think if we're open to the fact that there's so much culture that's come at us and so much that we've taken in, sure, then as artists, when we bring that back out in whatever form we're sharing.
Yeah.
You know, it can take a lot of forms.
I think I'm remembering correctly. George Harrison was sued, and I think it was over My Sweet Lord. And the suit was that he borrowed from, if that's, you can say that, He's So Fine.
Oh.
And he was asked, I believe, under oath, have you ever heard that? And he said, probably, which I think speaks to what you're saying. We hear things, we're influenced by such a variety, and so then maybe you don't pin your idea to that influence, but it's there.
Yeah, yeah, we're all products of everything that we've taken in, even if we don't, recognize it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Val Blaha, we're out of time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to introduce you.
That's right.
At Terroir, and then I'm going to sit in because I want to learn about this.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, thanks for watching. Come back, as I've said 100 times. I'm a lonely guy, so you can write to me at stephenwlong.com and send suggestions for guests or whatever. So we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you, Val.
Thank you. That was fun.
Oh, good. It is, yeah.